This is the unfiltered truth about entrepreneurship. Raw, no BS, no sugarcoating. Welcome to Entrepreneur Intel. I'm your host, Wes Matthews. Each episode, we'll learn from experienced founders and uncover the top 5% learnings that led to their success in all things personal, family, and business. This show is sponsored by Stealth Consulting, delivering clear marketing strategies, ROI, and no surprises. I'm super excited for today's guest, a serial founder with a passion for building stronger teams and a proven track record of innovation. He's co-founder of Hunt a Killer, which in 2020 was named Inc. Magazine's fastest growing CPG company. Super excited to dive into that. Also a podcast host and surface warfare officer for the U.S. Navy Reserve. Also co-founder and CEO of Talent Harbor. Welcome, Ryan Hogan.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me, Wes. Appreciate it.
Oh, man. It's been a long time coming. I know we talked a while ago to get to this very day. So super excited to kind of unpack some of the intro here and other stuff. But Talent Harbor is a new company, but you've been an entrepreneur for almost 2 decades. I got to ask you, I ask everybody that comes on the podcast, like, what's one of the most important lessons you've learned on this 20-year journey?
Oh, gosh. I think it's really about, like, never giving up. Right? Like when you think about entrepreneurship, like there's going to be failures every step of the way. And when I think about my journey, you know, there was a lot of false starts in the early days. There was a lot of times where I had an idea and I was like, well, I don't know how to do that idea. So I would just stop. And then I would have other brilliant ideas, but like I could never get them across the goal line. And I think these like kind of micro wins of like, for me, it's all about putting myself in the corner. And so like, and the only way through or the only way out is through. And so like starting something or like launching a company or launching a website or launching a product. And then naturally, like you have to take the next step. But it's been like these points of validation along the way that have really helped me grow. But the issue with entrepreneurship is like the only difference between success and failure is are you going to persevere? Like, are you going to continue? Are you not going to give up? And that's probably the biggest lesson, especially if I could go back in the early days, I would say, hey, dude, start earlier and start failing earlier because you're going to have to go through these things in order to learn.
It's great. I agree with you. And almost times I get like head trash and I think, well, it's kind of cliche, right? Like fail fast and do all these things. But, you know, as you're talking, there's this image I have in my mind. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's like a guy with a pick and he's in a cave and he's like mining for a diamond.
Yeah.
He's like really working, right? And he gives up like an inch away from the next hit that would get him that big diamond. And I always think about that. And, you know, you and I both are in a unique situation because we both kind of just started up a new company. So you have to pivot, you have to like change, you have to keep evolving. And that's scary, right? Because, you know, especially in today's day and age, you know, 2024, AI, all these things are coming, the market's changing rapidly. But being able to understand that you have to go through it. You know, you have to go through as an entrepreneur. There's no other way to do it. Nobody's going to do it for you.
You just brought up something like I think about that all the time too. There's a great book out there. I think it's called Outwitting the Devil, and it's the same author that writes about that the whole like 3 feet from gold or whatever that is.
Yep.
And I've been caught in this trap so many times of like when to give up. You know, when I think about a pre-product market fit, I always think about the lean startup, and so it's about like pivot or persevere. So pivot the marketing, which is the easiest, pivot the product, which is the hardest, one of the last things you want to do until you kind of find it and then go forth. But the hardest thing to do is like balancing am I going in the right direction? Like, is that diamond, is that like pot of gold, like 3 feet away, or do I need to pivot slightly? And those are some of like the hardest lessons. Cause in the early days, I spent probably 2 additional years that I didn't need to chasing a market that didn't exist.
Yeah, so talk about that. I mean, there's a lot to unpack with your intro, but co-founder of Hunt a Killer, like number one, what is that? And I want to go way back before that on how did you go down this journey? So what is it? And then where did you start?
Yeah, so Hunt a Killer was and still is today an immersive murder mystery experience. At the core, it's a game. But my co-founder Derek and I, we always had this vision of how do we distort reality? How do we create these these environments in which people actually think that they are participants or a character in the stories that we've created. And this goes back, and maybe we'll talk about this a little bit, but this goes back to another company him and I had started called Run for Your Lives, which was the first ever zombie infested 5K obstacle course race. So when you think about like Tough Mudder and Warrior Dash and Spartan Race, like we were actually a big three, but nobody paid attention to us, unfortunately, because it was this crazy zombie event. Um, and that failed. That failed hardcore. But it also led to the next iteration, or the next thing that Derek and I embarked on, and that was Hunt a Killer. And so Hunt a Killer started the same way that Run for Your Lives started, which was it on a campground. So with Run for Your Lives, we could put 10, 15,000 people through a obstacle race on any given weekend. And so we did the same thing. We rented a campground and we brought all these people in for this immersive murder mystery experience. We transformed 200 acres into a living crime scene. We put dead bodies all over the place. We put suspects, police, like you name it, they were there. You had to interrogate suspects. There was this grand finale. It was amazing, but we couldn't get scale with it. We had the demand, but we didn't know how to actually scale the experience. And so what we did was we said, okay, well, there's got to be a better kind of business model out there where we can take this product, iterate it just a hair, and find wider distribution. And that's when we got into subscription box. So probably about a week after our first event, this was October of 2016, we pivoted into subscription box and we started sending crime scene photos, police reports, I don't know, trinkets, evidence from the crime scene, all of these different things. And we would send it out on a monthly basis. So think like Loot Crate or Birchbox, except it's an immersive story and it's delivered episodically over 6 months. And it went gangbuster. Like I talked to Derek both then and we talk about this all the time of like, to hit product market fit like that twice in one lifetime, like I felt incredibly fortunate. Like it was lightning in a bottle, and I was like, I never thought after Run for Your Lives that we would find that and capture that again, and we did. And we were off to the races, which was great. We went from zero to about $50 million. I think at the peak, about $55 million over 6 years. We parlayed that into retail distribution. So we started looking at the direct consumer space, the subscription space. We started seeing a lot of issues, a lot of over reliance on paid advertising channels, things like that. We saw kind of companies kind of coming back to earth. And so we kind of had an inclination that we needed to do something different. And so we pivoted the company again, or we started diversifying. We got into retail distribution. And we did that just in time because after the pandemic, direct to consumer for us, that business channel started to contract heavily. But we had retail there to pick it back up. So that was a long story.
No, that's great. I mean, I think it's really interesting because you said it like, hey, the first business, like nobody knew who we were, the big two, Spartan, Tough Mudder, but that kind of helped propel you to build a $55 million business within 6 years. So like, sounds to me like that was a pretty awesome failure to teach and educate you guys. And then as along the way, which I think is really amazing, like you're pivoting still at 55 million as you're growing that business, you still have to change and pivot. So Talent Harbor today, talking about pivoting, AI, there's a lot of stuff changing in the economy. Like I think about my first company from 09 to 21. Those days were kind of easy, I feel. Now, like it's crazy. Like these devices here my kids have, and they don't talk on the phone. It's a Snapchat machine and it's a TikTok machine. Behaviors are changing. And you being in the game space, like what's your crystal ball? So like how, what are some of the challenges coming down the pipeline?
Yeah, I think there's I think there's a lot of challenges there. I mean, there's also a lot of opportunities. So it's not all doom and gloom. I think direct to consumer has a long way to go. And I think the way that a lot of people think about the direct consumer industry right now is paid advertising. And so like, where can I put $1 in and get $2 out? And the reality is those things don't exist. And so when you look at like 2010 to 2020, you've got the biggest corporations in the world that are not on Facebook and dropping money into that paid advertising channel. Hunt a Killer was spending, at its peak, we were spending $150,000 a day into the Facebook advertising channel. And so to think about like how much money we were spending each day, and the fact that bigger companies weren't there, like we all should have been scratching our heads saying like, hey, maybe something is fishy here. Like there's a reason that the big players are not entering this space. Um, but I also think there's huge opportunity. There's huge opportunity to create efficiencies within the business. There's tremendous opportunity to create amazing products. Like that's what it comes down to. And that's something that we focused on critically at Hunt to Killer. Was it was all about the experience. It was all about what is your niche, like why does the business exist, and really focusing on those things. So if you've got a great product, you've got the right price point, I think there's tremendous opportunity. There's efficiencies with AI. There's different things that you can do to where you don't have to carry the overhead that you had to carry 5-10 years ago. But we still have a lot of headwinds as far as the economy and getting people's buying patterns back to where they were.
As a founder entrepreneur with that idea, like how did you eventually get comfortable with spending 150,000 a day on Facebook? Or you have this idea, like how do you test that to the market to understand that you're onto something? Like how did you manage that scale?
So with Hunt to Kill, or excuse me, with Warware, like we put together business plans and we started ordering all this inventory, and we just had this idea of like, if you build it, they will come. And that was the thing that I think we actually stuck with way too long. The reality is, over a weekend, you can validate an idea or a concept, especially in consumer. What I'm learning very quickly in the B2B space is like it takes a little bit longer to understand if you found product market fit and like where the needs and where the pain points are. But in consumer, you can spend a weekend, put a website together, and start selling stuff on Monday with just the notion of an idea. And like, will you refund those people because you don't even have the product yet? Yes. Like I'm not saying to go take money and do devious things,
A different
but you
episode.
can validate. Yeah, you you can validate very quickly whether there's product market fit, and that's what we did. So when we launched the subscription box, like a day after that first event, we were already selling the subscription box to the emails or to the database that we had for the people that came to the event to test out the theory. People were buying it, so we're like, bingo, let's create this product. Derek and Adam, amazing first hire and incredible creative, went into the shop and like started putting together these experiences. But and then it's just over time, right? So like now we validate it, now we put it together, and now we're just tracking everything. So we didn't go from 0 to 150,000 in a year. Like we went from 0 to $1,000 over a week, and then 1,000 to 3,000, then 3,000 to 5,000. And we just kept incrementally increasing, but we were watching all the metrics as well. So we understood what our return was on that. We understood lifetime value, and we ensured that these were smart moves.
Could you do it again? I mean, based on the time frame and today with the current state of social media, the ad platforms, is it that I hate to say is it that easy because it's not easy, but what's changed from then until now with testing that theory?
Yeah, the algorithms. It's so funny when you say, "Could you do it again today?" Because like I think the probably the action that answers that question is like I'm in talent acquisition today. Like if it were that easy, I would probably I would get back in. And there's like ebbs and there's flows. So when I think about Run for Your Lives, we were on Facebook, and this was back in the day where like you saw whether you were following a company or you were following your best friend, you saw everybody's post in your feed. And then that got destroyed, and that company got destroyed. And then all these other companies, there was a lot of crowdfunding, crowdsourcing, and there was ways to like break into that. And there's still successful Kickstarter and Indiegogo campaigns out there, but like it was easier to do, the 2010 to 2013. And then when we entered the market, um, we had this most amazing paid advertising channel the world had ever seen. So Facebook screwed us on the first half with starting to limit the amount of people that could see company posts. That company went under, but then they developed the world's best advertising platform, and so we went back to them. We were like, "Oh, this is going to be great. They'll never pull the rug out." And we started spending a lot of money. The reality is today, and I've put together a few hypotheses. Like if I were going to do this today, I would do it alongside of some sort of influencer. They would have a healthy a healthy stake in the company to ensure that they were committed to the success. And I really think that like that's how you got to think. I could go on for direct consumer for hours, but we don't have to.
Because you bring up a good point, right? So something changed on Facebook, and then you re-engage. You didn't think that the rug would get pulled out from under you. Did you see that coming? And like, was it always living in the back of your mind? Because I think it's important as an entrepreneur, right? If you're building your business and systems that rely on third party and things, thinking like, "Hey, it's business as usual. I'm invincible." I come from digital marketing, so almost 20 years of my life was dependent on Google and algorithms and things. And I used
Yep.
to live in fear, and people would say, "What keeps you up at night?" I would say, if Google changes anything, like it could wipe my business out tomorrow,
Yep.
you know?
I it yeah, it's a great point. And like I should have been. I think I'm too much of an optimist almost to like a place of naivety. Like I'm just like, oh, it's all gonna work. We're gonna figure it out. And I was in a Vistage group out here in Seattle, and we would always talk about having too many eggs in one basket, and we would talk about that from a customer standpoint. So, like the red flags are if you've got what is it like more than 40 or more than 50% of your entire revenue coming from one customer, like that's not a healthy place to be. That number probably varies across different industries, but like the rule of thumb there is like if you have too much coming from one source, that's a bad thing. And for some reason, I never translated that to Facebook. I was like, no, we have tens of thousands, at one point, hundreds of thousands of customers. Like, but I didn't put that, like, Facebook wasn't our client. So what I wasn't thinking about is like 90% of our revenue is generated from a single advertising channel. And like, one, I should have done a better job thinking about that. And two, like, no, I was never worried. And it was ultimately Apple. Which
Yeah.
is a whole nother thing because Apple came out with the privacy stuff. It destroyed Facebook's algorithms. And like it was all on behalf of privacy. And then you see Apple's ad revenues like start to shoot up like the next few months. You're like, guys, you just screwed a whole bunch of consumer businesses on something that had really nothing to do with privacy, just had to do with you guys wanted more ad revenue. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about because yeah, it's like you're so dependent on Facebook, but then Apple made the change, which ultimately led to that impact.
Yeah.
So I can kind, so what led you as an entrepreneur to sell that business? Did you completely exit that company? Was it a private, like who ended up buying that company, and why did you end up selling?
Yeah, there's a long story in there. The first is I deployed. So I've been in the Navy now for 22 years. For the first 15 years, I was active duty. Started off as a naval air crewman, transitioned to a surface warfare officer, and then eventually transitioned to the reserves after Hunt to Killer started taking off. And I was like, this is great. I don't need to do this full time anymore. And so I've been in the reserves now for the last 7 years. We had just raised about $12 million in equity. It was December 2021. And literally 2 weeks later, I get a tap on the shoulder from the Navy and they're like, hey, you're deploying. And I was like, what do you mean I'm deploying? I'm a reservist. It's 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year. This makes no sense to me. Um, but no, they were serious. And so I had to deploy. So I left the country for 10 months. I embarked on the USNS Trenton. We went all over Europe and Africa. It was an incredible experience. But that was tough conversations with the investors. And it was tough, like very quickly getting things into place. How valuable EOS is, and it's an incredible system. And very quickly, like I had to figure out how to put people in the right seats to kind of deal with all of the things that I would be too far away to deal with. Um, so when I got back, we had a retail business that was just on fire. It was exceeding all expectations. We had just picked up Walmart, which was great, and Target. Like we had a few products, but Target went from like 2 SKUs to 6 SKUs in the matter of I think 18 months. And it's like it's all the same game. And so to put like, 6 Hunt to Killer boxes on shelves, like we were ecstatic by that. But the pay cycles or the payment cycles of dealing with retail and then dealing with the contraction of the other business, like we just knew we needed to find a home for it. And so I got back from deployment, I think March of 2022. That what are we in right now? 24? No, it must have been 23. March of 23. We put the business up for sale last July. We spent about 6-7 months putting it through the process, and then we ultimately sold it in January. I am free and clear at this point. Derek's hanging in there. He's doing some amazing things for What Do You Meme, and they're carrying on the Hunt to Killer legacy, and the products have never been better. So really excited to see what that brand continues to do.
That's awesome. So you're free and clear that you decide I'm going to start a company called Talent Harbor.
So yeah, I had, it was really weird. I had this mentor come to me, and there's so many stories in there, but I had this mentor come to me, and he was like, pick your favorite line item off of your Hunt to Killer P&L. And for me, it was people. It was the investment in people. It was the growth in people. It was supporting people. Like, it was everything people related. And there was this one line on there that was recruiting. And we spent probably like $700,000 on recruiting over that 6 years. I was like, there's got to be a better way for this. So I reached out to the most amazing recruiter we ever used at Hunt to Killer. And I was like, hey, do you want to join forces? Because I'm about to sell this company. I'm not going to be able to sit still. I got to get into something else. And B2B sounds like a fun place to play. And she obliged, took her a little bit, but she decided to come along. And so we're both now working on Talent Harbor. But I just see so much opportunity. Like, when you think about talent acquisition or recruiting, it's got a bad name. I told my uncle, he was like, hey, what are you going to do next? I was like, oh, I'm going to go do talent acquisition. He's like, you're going to be a recruiter? And so, like, nobody likes recruiters. And what I want to do is change that, because I think that recruiters generally are so damn expensive that, like, people are left thinking, why did I pay so much money for that? And I actually agree. And so that's why we're innovating in the actual business model of recruiting. And I think it's I think it's going to be an exciting time.
Well, it's interesting because, like, I have experience with recruiters in our last company. You know, we had a web developer that didn't work out for the company, left on great terms. This wasn't a great fit. And I'll never forget, I had a recruiting company that was to backfill the role that they were going to fill for this gentleman.
Yep.
And they're like, we have a phenomenal candidate for you. It was the same guy that left the company. I can't even make this stuff up. And I think their terms were 25% paid within 9 days of their salary. And, like, their schlick was, yeah, if it doesn't work out, we'll replace it. And I'm like, I was like, I can't. Like, this is crazy as an entrepreneur. Like, I get it. People's important. But so how do you see, like, I love that idea of, like, turn that, recruit, like, communicate that differently. So, like, how do you see, like, you said a term we were talking before the podcast that I thought was really catchy. Like, how do you change that sort of just vibe on recruiting? Like, how are you going to do that?
I think weirdly, I think it comes down to, like, branding and communication. Like, when I go to a recruiter's website, they all look the same. They all look like a law firm's website, and it's like stodgy and it, like, ugh. So I think branding has a lot to do with this, and then also positioning. Like, we're going to focus on one thing and one thing only. And we're calling it RAS, which is recruiting as a service. So it's a play on SaaS. But basically what it's trying to convey immediately is that this is a subscription. And essentially what we're doing is we found this big open white space, or blue ocean, if you're familiar with that book, of, if you're going to go out to market to hire somebody, generally you go to ZipRecruiter, LinkedIn, Indeed, something like that. You post it, you pay a couple $100, and then you get hundreds, if not thousands, of resumes. And the problem with that is, like, very quickly you're inundated. If you don't have your own internal processes streamlined, then, like, you don't even know how to review, how to vet. And so what we would do at Hunt to Killer is get frustrated, and then we would just go tap a recruiter. So we went from spending $100 to $200 and then dropping a $60,000 check for that 25% fee you just mentioned. And there's this wide open space right now for, why can't people, with all the technologies and all the advancements that we've made in talent acquisition, why are we still following a business model from, like, 25 years ago? And so what we're doing is, for a monthly subscription, essentially we are guaranteeing a certain amount of qualified and vetted candidates. So we use our same hiring for culture, hiring for experience and expertise. There are 3 interviews that happen. We're tapping people on the shoulder. We're doing the same exact thing that we do for our executive search, except we're doing it for this thing called RAS, and we're doing it on a monthly subscription. So I don't know. I'm excited about it. Well,
No, it's not. Yeah, no, it sounds cool. Like, how do you? and I'm just curious, like more as an entrepreneur, like what's the sales is it you get your time back? Because interviewing people, spending like, I don't know if people realize like that's a ton of time and you have to kiss a lot of frogs to find the one you're looking for. And I don't know if a lot of entrepreneurs don't put a lot of weight on that. Like, oh, it's no big deal. We'll just hire somebody. Like, there's a
Yeah.
lot to it, right?
Yes. Yeah, there's like two main things that are really hard with recruiting. The first is sourcing. So where are you going to find these qualified candidates? And so there's passive and then there's active. So there are passive candidates out there, and those are people that already have jobs that aren't looking for jobs. And then there's active, and those are the people that are actively searching. And most companies, and actually most recruiters, only go after the active candidates. The reality is, it's the passive ones that are already rock stars at their current jobs are the ones that you actually want. So the first part of it is sourcing. The second part of it is what you just said. It's vetting and qualifying. And so I think like as business leaders, for some reason, we've been over indexing in expertise and experience. And those things are needed, right? Like you can't bring somebody through that was, a manufacturer worker, and you can't expect them to be a great, I don't know, mechanical engineer or something like that. Like experience and expertise matters. But you know as well as I do through the people analyzer that half the battle is finding the right person. But a lot of recruiters like skip this step, and a lot of businesses, unfortunately, don't know how to vet for do their values align with ours. So what we try and do is we both predict future performance because that's important, that's experience and expertise, but we also want to predict future behaviors because I would say that 80% of the people that failed at Hunt to Killer, it's because we didn't do a good job vetting for who they were as a person and were they going to fit inside of the organization. So anyhow, the sales pitch there is like we vet for performance, we vet for behavior, and then we tap candidates on the shoulder. So like we are going after those passive candidates who already are happy with jobs, and we're convincing them that it would be better to be with you.
My first company, as the visionary leader entrepreneur of that company, I had to come to a realization and tell myself I cannot be part of the hiring process because I would literally want to hire everybody I interviewed because I
Yeah.
saw opportunity and just kind of, like everybody shows up with their A game. Everybody's going to say, oh, hell yeah, I can do that. And I did this. And you're like, you get excited, right? As a visionary, I had to like get out of the way.
Yeah.
How do you like being in this space? I mean, you have a lot of experience with your company. So you've been in the trenches to now you're on the other side. Like skill over cult, like attitude. Like, what do you look for? Like, hey, these two things must be like a yes before you even pursue. Is there any tips or nuggets there?
Yeah, it goes back to exactly what you just said. Like it's attitude. Like they've got to be curious. They've got to want to grow. They've got to be coachable. Like these are some of the things that we look for, and this can be the first 15 minutes of a screening phone call. When you look at someone's resume, you'll know whether they've held similar positions, and we could talk about that. Like when you're vetting for positions, the other thing that was a common mistake that we made at Hunt to Killer is like we're like, oh, we're going to be $1 billion company, so we need a VP that was at $1 billion company, and we go out and get that person, pay them a lot of money each year, and realize that like that person does not know how to operate inside of a startup. So, like, yes, there are nuances to looking at a resume and understanding, like, do they actually have the experience and expertise to be able to become a high performer in the role or the seat that you have? Um, but that aside, so once you have qualified that candidate, like, you can have a very quick conversation with them to understand, like, what do you value as a human being? And also starting to, and I can share these docs with you later, but like we also have a full kind of template that we send out to clients for free. Like, we want people to hire well, whether it's with us or not with us. But we've got a set of questions that we ask them that are all behavioral based questions to really start to figure out if there's going to be alignment.
No, that's really great. Maybe we'll save that for the end because I'm sure a lot of the listeners would love to get some feedback. I think this is a challenging thing across any entrepreneurial company. Um, this is a multifaceted thing because I think that you now have to fish for a pool of people that are open, right? That are actively working for a company that could be open. So then you have a company, right, that signs up for the RAS service. But sometimes companies don't really show well or their websites are terrible. Like, how do you work with a
Yeah.
business to say, man, you have to be kind of sexy or appealing because what you're working with is just terrible. Like, how do you navigate that?
Yeah, we help make them sexy. But you're absolutely right. So like the biggest difference between passive clients and passive candidates and active candidates, is that your passive candidates, like if they're not looking, then they need to be sold, and that's something that I don't know. I used to take this for granted, and I don't know if you did, but I was like, come work at Hunt to Killer. It's the best place to work. Like I shouldn't have to convince you. Not in
Right.
like an asshole type of way, but just like like, of course you're going to want to join us because we're doing amazing things and this is the happiest place on earth.
Right.
Um, but that's not the reality when you go after passive candidates. Like if people aren't actively looking, then you have to sell. And so, like to a certain degree, we make companies look sexy. So we put together an actual marketing package for every single role. And it's got your logo, it's got things about you, it's got the benefits, it's got all the great stuff in it. Um, we haven't had a client yet that like wasn't actually sexy, but it's a great question where like
I have a few
if
I can send over to you. I mean,
that's
we get
hilarious.
that. We get a lot of, I have a lot of people that are like, man, we're so busy. Like, I just need to get talent. And then I look at
Yes.
like two things. It's like, well, you have like a 1-star review on, whatever that website's called. I forget now.
Glassdoor,
Glassdoor,
everybody.
right? Which is kind of pointless now. And I think people see through that. But it's like, what would you recommend though? Because there are those companies that, you know, do the same thing, expect a different result. Like, what would you recommend to a business that before they meet you or they could start to do on their own to make themselves be a little bit more sexy and appealing to the marketplace?
Hmm. I mean,
Like winning awards for like best place to work, is that important? Stuff like that.
it is. I think that here's the problem. This is why your question is so tricky. Is like a lot of these things take time, right? Like if someone's looking to hire a year from now, then like start getting everybody together to make sure that they're all posting good reviews in different places and start applying to all the best places to work. The problem is like those things actually take time. The best thing I believe you can do as an organization, and I know this is going to sound based upon like your and I's experience. Have a system in place. The sexiest companies understand where they're going. They've got a strategy for how they're going to get there. Everybody understands what they do inside of the organization. And like the reality is like we can polish the turd externally if on the inside it's a not a well-oiled machine because all businesses are falling apart and just figuring it out, but just having some sort of framework in place and clear communication.
You bring up a good point, and I had a guy that we're talking about like EOS or some type of entrepreneurial framework, like getting your shit together. And we were talking about the VTO, the Vision Traction Organizer, about a company, right? It's where a visionary entrepreneur can put his thoughts, talk about culture, target market, 3-year plan, like literally the whole plan for the organization. And a guy I knew worked for a local water damage company, and he was familiar with EOS, and he was looking to leave the company, and he was interviewing around town, and he came back and he like saw me, he was like ear to ear, and he's like, "Hey, I got to talk to you." I go, "What's up?" He goes, "I just interviewed at a new company. You're not going to believe what happened." I said, "What's that?" He goes, "The CEO, as soon as I sat down, whipped out the VTO, and it was laminated, and he started at the top."
Hell
And
yes.
I go, and maybe I knew that, but like I was watching somebody explain it to me. What I thought was really powerful about that is because they were in hyper growth mode. They were like, hey, we want to go from 5 trucks on the road to 100 within 3 years, like who their ICP, their ideal customer profile, blah, blah, blah. So for him, like he was able then to buy into the culture and see the vision of the company to say, I want to deal with growth. I want to be part of a growing company. Now, if that BTO would have said, we only want 5 trucks on the road, we only want 50 accounts, we want to do the same thing every day, then he would have
Yeah.
been like, eh. So to me, like that's a really cool kind of thing that I love what you said is, get your house in order internally. And I think that's a tool that companies can use to get
Yeah.
their stuff together before they like bring more people into the chaos.
Yes, 100%. Like if you don't know where you're going, like how do you know who you need? And if you don't know where you're going, like how do you know what you need? Like it just it all comes back to that same thing. So like, we at Talent Harbor can put together some amazing marketing materials and make you look incredible. If the first time they like sit down and the hiring manager like doesn't even really understand like the role or have things like crystal clear, it just comes across as unprofessional, like that's going to be the issue. So it's really about, is the house in order? um we can fix all the other stuff when we go to market.
Now, do you recommend anything, right? Like, do you implement EOS? Are you into any of that kind of stuff and building all your companies as you move forward?
Yeah, I just so I'm a huge like believer in EOS. We self-implemented in Hunt to Killer, then we eventually went out and we had an expert implementer, Margaret Dixon out of Boulder, Colorado. Incredible human being, whipped us right up in the shape. It was great. Um, we have EOS in Talent Harbor already. We operate it. We love it. Um, so yeah, I mean that would be the system. I'm not an implementer. I should be clear about that. But I do have a podcast called Confessions of an EOS Implementer because I have so much respect for that industry and for what they do. So yeah.
So why a podcast? Like why did you go down that path for your podcast? Like that's very specific. I'm
Yeah.
curious around why that's so specific.
I think there's a couple things there. It is specific. And like the other thing it doesn't do for us, and we've been realizing this, is like a lot of recruiting shops are industry specific. And EOS is not industry specific. EOS is anybody with a company between 10 and 250 employees. I forget what the whole spiel is, but
Sure.
like there's a spiel there. Um, and like we're quickly realizing that like we're taking clients from every industry. My belief is like I don't actually know, other than a marketing standpoint, I don't really understand like why recruiting has to be industry specific. Like we can find anybody. If you tell me what you're looking for, like we have the systems and the processes and the people to go out and find that perfect candidate that you're looking for. So it probably makes it a little easier in marketing. But for me, it's a couple things. The first is when we were vetting expert implementers back in 2019, 2020, I had conversations with probably about five. And the thing that struck me the most is like, y'all have great stories. Like, these are not people right out of B school or like somebody who's like, oh, I just bought this franchise. It was this or McDonald's, and I decided
Right.
to buy an EOS franchise. These are real leaders with real experiences, real executives, real entrepreneurs that are mostly at a time in their life where they're just like, I want to give back and I love this thing. And I wanted to share those stories with the world. And so I think the content actually makes for an incredible podcast because of the stories. And then it helps me kind of connect in with the community and like understand who's who. And um, it allows me to be a part of it without going and buying a franchise and actually having to drink the Kool-Aid.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. I totally agree with you. I mean, yeah, people don't trip upon EOS. Something happened and really moved them in their life, and
Yeah.
everybody has a really unique story. It's really cool. Definitely like one of the best communities I've ever been a part of. Gino's amazing. Like anytime I hear Gino talk, and he's in my backyard here in Michigan. Like it was started here out of EO Entrepreneur Organization. But that's really cool. So I got to ask you, I normally don't ask, but like I normally pay, you pay 25% of somebody's salary. Like that's the traditional, like what's the pricing model for a subscription service for recruit? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so that's a great question. We kind of have three different tiers. I'll just talk about the one tier because the other tiers are
Yeah,
generally for cleared folks. Like we're finding that government contracting is actually like a pretty big niche for us because they always need bodies and seats. Um, but when you look at a typical recruiter, and we did the same thing, and still, if we take white glove searches, like we'll do integrator searches and we'll
sure.
do core function leader searches,
Right.
and like we will do that on the standard fees. That's anywhere from like 60 to 120,000. Um, For the RAS, it's $5,000 a month. And for $5,000 a month, you get 3 to 5 qualified candidates. There is no success fee. The other thing we're finding is we've got a professional service provider that needs a constant stream of accountants. And for $5,000 a month, he gets 3 to 5 qualified candidates each month. And he fills his own ATS, applicant tracking system, his own database up with the clients that we gave him. So each month he's got an additional 3 to 5 that go into his database. And when he needs to grow, he's got people he can tap on the shoulder, call back, or things like that. So generally what we see is it's $5,000 a month. We can get something closed anywhere between 2 and 3 months. So it's 10 to 15,000. Our clients love us. So they'll flip it off for a few months and they'll flip it back on when they've got to hire again. When you look at that against a $60,000 success fee, it's 10, 15,000 spread over 3 months, or 60,000 lump sum. It makes more sense.
No, it's great, man. I think it's a cool concept. I love the RAS. That's a sexy term. Hopefully you coined that. Well, Ryan, dude, it's been super fun hanging out. Learned a ton. One last thing, if anybody listening wants to reach out to you, connect with you on multiple fronts, what's the best, easiest way for them to contact you?
Probably LinkedIn. I'm all over LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is just, it was at Ryan E. Hogan. And then email ryan@talentharbor.com. But love connecting with entrepreneurs. We don't have to talk about talent. We can talk about anything. Hit me up. Happy to help. And let's have a conversation.
Cool, man. Ryan, thanks so much. This has been another episode of Entrepreneur Intel. Thank you for joining us. For show notes or other episodes, please visit us at entrepreneurintel.com. Until next time.